gotten on yet. We haven't gotten up anywhere yet, so it's great to have this.
Yeah, no, and that was, I regret that I didn't ask from the very beginning. But anyhow, it's good. Feel free, like if there's anything you'd like to repeat, then we will totally understand.
Okay. I guess I could start just a brief recap of where we started. That point. Why did this happen in Taiwan? Why was this place interesting? And I think that I'll share a link here. Analyzing GitHub Civic Tech. There is a Okay, I'm going to find this link, which is about scale of the. Seal cow. No. Okay. I found it. How do I share a link so that it will be recorded in the live? Can I put it in chat and that'll work?
You can put it in the chat and then I'll make sure it shows up in the description.
Okay. So if you take a look at the Civic Tech community graph that this person on screen at the conference, and you can see in G0V, which is a play on words. They'll do like budget.tw.g0 or .g0v.tw, and so it'll be like budget.gov.tw, and they'll be like one letter off from the official government, and they'll rebuild stuff, and it'll be like one letter off, so it's like a shadow. They're shadowing the official sites. That's how it started. It was just technologists hacking up projects, doing it better than the government had, and providing services. And so G0V has exploded, and all of it, I think, in the same way that it is happening at city scale with Toronto, this is the right scale, and that's why, I mean, it does get to the name. The name Pol.is is kind of what we've been aiming for, too. It's that this is the right scale, right? Like, where Taipei is, where Toronto is, there are people in that city who are invested in that place, that culture, that geography, that political system. It's local enough that people are really affected by the things that happen there, and that the tech community can make some real impact with working with city government. And so Gov has had an outsized impact in the global civic tech community, and the fact that they were there supporting the government's tech efforts is why vTaiwan was able to happen. Because like in the talk that I did in Taipei, where I kind of walked through Minister Jacqueline Tsai's involvement, she was able, as a minister in the government, to come to the Civic Tech organization and say, here's the problem we're having, what can you all collectively do to help us, and if you're able to do that, we'll engage in power sharing and make this a win-win. And it's very exciting to have that in Toronto, and maybe that's why, Patrick, I was able to anticipate what you were saying, because I have seen in the difference between all of these people working at what is a city level and Taipei, and a national level, and like it's like a national civic tech movement focused in the city, and that is been a really powerful model over there. That the whole organization kind of begins and ends with that city or that country, and it's cities have this kind of island nation status. And I don't know if you've seen there is a wonderful idea, I think, that, let's see, did you see the New York Times article on mega regions in the United States?
No.
Also interesting. Okay, yeah, here you go. It's a beautiful map as well. I'd send a link there. That these are possibly the right abstractions for these movements to come up around, where we have cultural and regional similarities, and people are invested in a region in a way that they're not invested or feel very conflicted about maybe the overall political system, but they don't feel conflicted about the values and people in that region. And Cascadia is a Cascadia now is, on the Pacific Coast is the joke, like the California Seattle axis is just going to pop off and become its own thing. Same with Texas, and you kind of have that joke. But anyway, I think it's really exciting to hear about Toronto, that's happening in Toronto, and so I'll kick it back to you now, and that's a brief recap of that idea. Why did this happen in Taiwan, and why they have an outsized impact in the global civic tech community, and the fact that they're a civic tech group in supporting a government meant that really interesting things could emerge there, and they without that it may not happen elsewhere, right? This is like to have a regulator or a government do this on their own may be rather overwhelming if they don't have a young, digitally enabled group of people that are willing to support those efforts and the like.
Okay. Yeah. No. That's super helpful context. I guess right before you came online, Bianca and I were talking about how this is particularly the case study you guys put together for Uber, and how it helped set legislation and direct the conversation in the preliminary phases of that legislation crafting in Taiwan. That's like really hits, I guess it hits home in a lot of large cities because they all dealt with that, but Toronto had there was lots of debacles over when we went through that. It extended for a very long period of time. They actually had to, they'd shut session down a lot, and people would come and stay all day to speak, and then tensions were really high, and they'd kick everyone out. There was just lots of, it was a very painful process. And so I feel like even if counselors, those in power and those who were involved in that process were to hear how it went down with, using your tool, I think that would really have an impact. And just another distinction that kind of came up in our conversation before is that I think in many of the issues that are particularly relevant to me as an individual, I find my antagonism is with, if there's any antagonism that I feel, it's with city staff who kind of, with some of the issues that me as a personal individual are concerned about, I feel like I'm clashing with. And I'm also interested in how this tool might be used to kind of resolve and come to consensus between those who are in the civic tech community outside government and those who are the staff insiders. As well as being able to resolve things among citizen stakeholders.
That's fascinating.
Anyway, super cool.
I'll paste this in, a link coming that you can add. This is a diagram that, have you seen Audrey, the Quartz article on Audrey?
I did, yes.
Okay. Audrey is extraordinary, and Audrey is extraordinary in many of the same ways that the two of you are extraordinary, in that you're dedicating an enormous amount of your time to improve the government where you are, and this diagram I think kind of gets to that point. You can see all of the work that they did in this, that we were a node in this process, and we did facilitate a really important part of the process. But we did enable like a better process, a better pipeline. But the work that they were doing was the work that you are doing is the kind of cradle for all of that, in making sure that the issue works, working with the civil servants directly to move information around, getting the information that the government knows out to the population so that they can be informed in discussion. Actually shipping the Pol.is conversation to the population. Knows out to the population so that they can be informed in discussion. Sorry, I'm getting echoed. Do either of you have? Bianca, it might be from your side. I don't know if you have headphones.
Yeah, it's good now, yeah?
It's better. It is, yeah. Sorry about that. And then taking the information that came out of the Pol.is conversation, making it open data, getting transcripts of the face-to-face dialogues that are done, the face-to-face work that you've been doing, Bianca, things like that are exactly what they were doing, and this enhanced this plugged into that. But the fact that this exists is very exciting, because we're finding, I would say actually this is maybe the second time this conversation that we're having right now is maybe like the second one. Like Taiwan would be the first time that we found this process in some form with a young population of technologically enabled people who kind of fully got what we were doing because it was one step beyond what they were already doing. You have the pipeline that we kind of diagrammed out here in place, and we're a better version of one node of it. And that is like, it seems like that's what it takes, because and it also seems like without this process in place, the fact that, and I have many times gone into meetings, even in the past couple weeks, a few times, where I'm handing someone, this, what we're doing, and it's completely overwhelming and has just, thousands of implications, because there hasn't been the kind of learning that you've had over time to build up processes of how face-to-face goes, and the way that you might educate a population before asking them to comment, and some of what the outcomes are, and this is rather scary. And so from our side, we're very excited and working with Audrey, but Audrey just joined the government, actually. The premier was so excited about vTaiwan that he has the premier of the new government of Tsai. Hold on just a second. I'll send one. Here is an article on Tsai Ing-wen. She is the first female president. Directly under her is the premier, and then the premier of the new government had to. We worked all of what we showed with Uber and Airbnb. Happened with the old government. The new government came in, and the premier was excited enough about what had happened in the previous government with vTaiwan that Audrey was given a new ministerial position, which is effectively like the Secretary of State, Secretary of the Interior in the United States. It's the top level of the administration with a mandate to get vTaiwan process going in all of the ministries, things like that. And so this is a very big event over there for them. But what we are really interested in is putting together this process, this pipeline, to say here are the steps, so that when we're talking, because for instance, tomorrow we're about to talk to the County of Essex. It is completely possible that they will have no process at all like what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And we would like to be able to, as we spread this, because it is like Audrey is working inside of Taiwan and is going to conferences around the world, but all of the kind of call to action is pointed to our 3-person team, and our 3-person team is building a tool but doesn't have this pipeline, which is what Audrey is building and what you are building, and so the pipeline is really critical here. So we need to fuse these things together to make that a realistic option for governments to do, where it's not just here's how you use Pol.is and there's best practices around that. There's the other side, and from Audrey's side, which is here's how we fit it into a legislative process over time repeatedly. And that's really, at this point, all we've done is to publish some blog posts of what Taiwan did. There is so much room there, and get to that, because it's way too much, because the civic tech community kind of has to talk amongst itself and reconcile all of these different contexts and governments and rules, and kind of figure out where the common ground is. It's just not something for our position that we can really see, but you guys can. And so I wanted to be really explicit about that out front, that like we're here to serve you guys in however we can to try to enhance your process, and really a lot, the real work here is getting done by is getting done by the civic tech communities that are embedded with the governments.
Okay.
So
yeah.
I have a few thoughts about the process piece,
Yes.
because the bulk of the stakeholders that would weigh in on these kinds of topics aren't the tech people, right? They're the long-standing, like whether they're housing advocates or transit advocates, or
That's right.
And I think like that in that pipeline diagram, how how they, I don't know if they partner with people who know how to use a platform, you know, like I'm trying to picture how this would go down in a physical thing. Like, do you have a buddy system? How do you make a 70-year-old advocate comfortable? You know, you park them with someone who knows how it works. But the nice thing is that all of those stakeholders pre-exist. So it's a matter of getting the stuff into their hands, which is not it's not the civic tech community, it's all the advocacy and stakeholder communities. So that, like, that's one thing. A second thing is that the different levels of government have different mandated, like in Canada, there's certain processes where you have to, by law, do consultation at particular phases in the legislative process. Environmental assessments are one. I'll send you some of this stuff, but there's ones where you could see there are diagrams and the government has to do the consultation at certain points. Same with different things that go on. But I think the final thing is that there's different groups. Like the woman that I learned consultation from, she's worked in this stuff for 15 years. She's got a small firm, has a handbook on that process, that pipeline, and has taken that process to lots of different places and used it.
Amazing.
So that's something I should share with you, because because a lot of it's not country specific. It's very process specific, and it's about defining things like what's on the table, what's off the table, how many times you need to meet so that you can show people what you did with what they said. You know, like it's got very high level process steps, and so I'll share that with you. I'm not sure if we've got something electronic, but I can get you a copy.
What was
of that.
her name, just so I have it in mind?
Nicole Swerhun.
Okay.
And so the firm is Swerhun.com. I'll type it in here. And, you know, there is a big community of practice around public engagement. So there's the IAP2 is the sort of global association for participation. I'm not sure what they're, like everybody does this a bit differently. And there's, like any body, there's parts where it gets into jargon overload and whatever else. You know, everybody kind of does this in their own way. But there's, you know, there's other firms and stuff like that. So I'm happy to send you some of those resources, because I think that'll help you see how many pre-existing pipeline diagrams there are. And it just helps you hinge into those, right? Like it's always, everybody has to organize it the way that they want. But quite confidently, I've seen the process that Nicole has sort of developed and evolved over the years, and it's been, I mean, it's like the same things you do. There's certain things you just have to do them every time, and when you do them, you get to good outcomes. So it's
wonderful, and the best possible outcome is that there is something pre-existing like this that I can, in my meeting tomorrow with a county commissioner, or that, and they have rather large, hundreds of thousands of people, I believe, in this county, because it's right outside of London. That I can say, oh, if you haven't done this before, or if you feel like you need some scaffolding around the consultation process, here it is, and here's roughly where we would fit into that. And then they can map what they're doing onto that, and then see where we would fit in there. That would be very valuable, I think.
And it's really a big part of in these discussions. Like one thing I've learned a lot about is reminding people who's in charge of what, because there are boundaries, and you know, it's not because everybody says you have to do something that you have to do it. You have to explain how you do or do not apply it, right? Like it's stuff like that, because a lot of time consultation, lots of people in a room, people start thinking that they're not in charge anymore when they are, right? Government is authority in a lot of the decision making. So it's a matter of sort of reminding people about their roles. Is a thing. So it's just sort of that's a constant topic. So it's interesting. But I'll share all the stuff I've got just you know, because just when they see that those things exist too, because to give you the difference between, say, Canada and America, even in America you probably see all those town halls where people just get up and yell, like it's a back and forth. That's not, so even the Canadian sort of public meeting model is not common in America. So that term is already not the same thing, and we're not even far away from each other.
That may be because it works. We don't want anything that's effective.
No comment. No.
It sounds like it might de-escalate things. Again, not looking for that. Doesn't really fit with our media model.
So I'll type a few of those things in, but those were the quick off the top of my head sort of connections to what you're talking about.
Fantastic, thank you.
Okay. Pat, anything you had on your mind, Pat?
I think the other, any other questions I had might fit better. Were you thinking a demo fit in here? I probably, anything I could say, probably wait till after.
I'm just opening up Swerhun and looking at that. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. If I can't find anything electronic, I will happily send you a copy of the handbook in the mail.
This is extraordinary. I am so glad I just said whatever it was that I said that led you to just hand this to me on a silver platter.
Good.
You said this is a handbook. It's a something you can get.
Yeah.
Buy our book.
Yeah.
We
just took it off Amazon because that wasn't making sense because most people are ordering locally. So I'll send you one. That's not going to work.
Oh, you'll just send me one.
Yeah. So you just give me your address. I'll send you one.
That's amazing. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Probably not live.
No, and I'll see if there's anything that's an electronic. If we have a copy of it that's electronic.
Yes.
Because we have a whack of them in the office.
So I had two thoughts. That I wanted to bring up, and that were in response to what Patrick was saying a while back. One is that with regards to expanding networks of people, they did something really innovative in Taiwan that we did not expect or had not thought of. They passed the Pol.is conversation out over Facebook ads. They put a spend account in place, and the government pushed it out until there were, from all these different networks, some thousands of people, and then they would let it disseminate, and then they would push it a little bit further, and it would, and then let it disseminate organically, and people would share it, and that brought in, and then once there were some thousands of people in it, they would just shut it off and shut the ad campaign off, and that basically did that until there were enough people in. And with Facebook ad, you can target so granularly that if you want to target a neighborhood or people with certain demographic profiles, it's so our ad targeting is so deep that they were able to do that in a really sophisticated way. And so with regards to expanding the population, because Patrick had said that over Messenger, that the population is narrower than we would like, but et cetera. And it was for, I think, in Taiwan as well. And so they basically had their organic network that would participate, and then they enhanced that by going out. And that's a problem that I've heard from a lot of different people, like, how do you get people to participate in this? And effectively, what's really interesting about that model and that method and where they went with that is that it puts a price on it. It basically says, like, okay, we value their voices enough to go get them and to let them know what's happening and to go to them in the medium that they are and then pull them in. And so, for what it's worth, that was something that they did. We saw a quick word about ratios because it was kind of interesting. This is all open data, so I'm going to show you some statistics behind the scenes, but it's open data, so I'm not showing you anything that's not publicly available. Let's see. Let me just share my screen real quick. Okay. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the conversation. This is the Uber conversation that happened last summer. You can see that 1,600 people voted and only 100 commented. And this is what we see in every single conversation. It's 10 to 1. 10 people participate in agreeing and disagreeing with other people's comments and producing data and producing the opinion groups by voting than actually submit comments. And you can see, like, over 1,600 people on average, they voted on like 30 comments each. Oh, hold on, let me It still shows me as screen sharing, but Patrick lost me, so I'm going to restart it.
Oh.
Let's see. Patrick, do you have that back now?
Oh, okay. You know what? I'm not seeing it on mine, but if Bianca sees it, then it's probably getting recorded.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. So what's interesting about those numbers is that an enormous amount of, if you look at like the activity, take a look at the number of comments that are submitted, 195, versus the total number of votes cast, which is about 30 votes per person for 1,600 people, which is 46,000 votes. 46,000 times that someone hit agree, disagree, or pass. That number is where the transformation is. The fact that we're engaging a whole new strata of citizen, they don't have something to say. They don't know the issues, but they can certainly score themselves on statements that are made by others. It's a much more accessible way for people to enter the consultation process, and we've demonstrated this over and over again. I'll show you the Airbnb conversation. Just a second. Has exactly the same. Yeah, this is even larger. The stats real quick here. In this one, 2,000 people voted. There was a lower number of average votes, but still 31,000 votes were cast. 200 people commented. Again, 2 to 1. 200 people commented, 2,000 people voted. Before this, there were something like 20 people or so, 20 to 30 people participating in the consultation process. And after this, the quality went up, and it 10x'd the number. It like 10x'd and 100x'd the people participating, submitting their ideas, and interacting with others' ideas. And so the numbers across all of these consultations were really strong. And you can see we show you a distribution of how many times people voted, and some other stats as your conversation goes. But I just wanted to bring that up because the issue of it's a core issue that we should really talk about throughout the conversation tonight, which is like what population is being asked to come to consultation, and what are we expecting of them when we get there? And I think that to draw just a simple comparison, like in the States, okay, well, what I just demonstrated to you would be contrasted to, like, we're going to have them submit a comment, and we don't know when, like, basically they're commenting on every statement. They're being asked to generate a statement that is a response to tens or hundreds of pages of legalese. And that is markedly different than being asked to generate a single reaction to a single point. And that disaggregation of ideas and that disaggregation of actions means that someone can like come in while they're on the bus on their way to work from a link to hit a button a few times and produce data about where generally they are on all of these dimensions that have been created by the other people in the population. And then they can leave. And they can do that anonymously, or they can log in with social. And so the idea of reducing the friction, both in the mental energy that people have to do to get involved in the consultation, and the friction of what it means to be a participant, meant that there was a huge uptick in 100x uptick in overall participation in the consultation. So that's a we don't other than having that number we have that number. Audrey tweeted that out, and we have that embedded on the Pol.is Gov lander. But I wanted to at least, since we're recording this live, go a little bit more into detail about that, what that's meant, and kind of why we think that's happened on the platform, and like what that meant downstream was that there was more confidence that we had a representative sample of like a larger amount of people. We have a representative number of people. Generally the groups are represented. They may not be represented proportionally, but at least the ideas are out there. Mm-hmm. And the ideas from multiple populations have been entered into the discussion, have been reacted to. And so, that's kind of one big idea. The other one that I wanted to respond to was regarding the civil servants, the relationship between civic tech, civil servants, and population. and how the civil servants piece is a frustration there from what Patrick said. So the issue that we saw this on most markedly was online liquor sales. Online liquor sales was blocked in Taiwan for 6 years, and the vTaiwan process cracked it and got to legislation in like 3 months. And the reason that happened was that when they ran the Pol.is conversation upstream, in other words, before all of the face-to-face stuff, they were able to find consensus among the previously, warring parties that had each locked up the ministries. The ministries couldn't act because the people were talking past each other. When the people stopped talking past each other, then the ministries were freed up to act, and then things kind of decalcified and things could move on. That was a very exciting kind of interplay, and really, to make it very concrete, the civil society, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, that kind of interest group, was saying statements like these. We don't want to allow online liquor sales. We don't want to make it easier for people to get liquor. We want to focus on prevention and prevention programs. We're not doing that enough. And so that was like generally the platform. The other side was saying things like, this is not going to make it any easier for people to get it than walking to the corner store. This is not going to change things, in that way. And what's very interesting is that these two groups completely agreed on these fundamental points. They had been talking past each other for years, but the civil society groups that were saying, they agreed that they did not think it was going to be any easier. They didn't actually think it was going to increase alcoholism. They did want to focus on treatment programs. The other side completely agreed that there needed to be more focus on treatment programs. There had been previously no point at which they said those things and mutually agreed on those things. And so when some thousands of people got together, and it was clear that both groups were in the space, and it was also clear that both groups fundamentally agreed on those points, it was a breakthrough for the whole issue. And that freed up the ministries to actually take concrete action and move forward on that. And that was a huge. I see that as actually probably that was, I think, the most exciting thing. And the outcome was attacked on Facebook. There was someone who had said like, oh, the person who did the consultation doesn't even drink, and it was like basically just like being sarcastic and snippy about the whole process. People from both sides of the issue jumped on them and said like, everything you're saying has been brought up in the consultation. The consultation was completely fair, and like people from both sides both attacked people who were attacking the process on Facebook, and that was like extraordinary because even though they disagreed fundamentally, they moved forward in a way that all sides could get around. I guess maybe it's also particularly we have a lot of talking past each other in the States. That's like the fundamental thing. When someone says like, oh, we should support military families, it's like that's not a controversial issue. It's not like they're staking their identity. A whole group of people is staking their identity on this. And on the other side, Peter Thiel gets applauded for being a gay American, and it's like we need to uphold gay rights, and maybe that's not such a controversial issue anymore on the right. But we don't really have an opportunity for people to kind of like connect or actually agree. There's no place to say I agree with that. And so that's kind of like what we're trying to make explicit, is to give people an opportunity to do that. So I'm sorry that was long. I just wanted to respond. Talking about there did actually happen, and it was very encouraging. So Patrick, if either of you have any questions on that, that's cool. I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, I can go on to talking about platform stuff and.
Yeah, I'm down.
No, I think platform stuff would be amazing, even if just for rewatch value after this. Because you're talking about all these things. I'm like visualizing it because I spent some time digging through and trying to understand the UI and knowing how what you're saying applies to it. But just for anyone else watching, it probably would help to have the basis.
Let's do it. Okay, so here's what Pol.is is and how it works. So I'm going to go to a conversation here that we use for demos, and I'm going to paste the link in here for you. And so what I'd like you to do is, and both of you, if you would do this along with me, you've probably heard of the concussion crisis in the United States.
Football?
Yeah, football.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So it's a big, hairy, multidimensional issue, and so we've put this out in our social network and put it on our lander for a little while to get people in so that I could, we would have a nice multidimensional data set to show. And so here it is. So what I'd like you to do is go ahead and take maybe 2 minutes here. If you're watching at home, you can click on the link and do this too. And go ahead and agree or disagree at pass with statements that have been written by others. And you'll see in the visualization below that your dot is going to move closer towards people that voted like you did. So as you agree and disagree and pass on statements above, in the visualization below, your dot, which is the blue dot, and if you sign in with social, you'll see your face in that dot, which you should do, and I recommend, because then you'll get a real sense of it. Your dot will move closer towards the group and eventually pop into a group that voted like you are voting. Generally, not on every issue, but in a general sense, and that's where the AI, that's where the brain of Pol.is is. The data set that this produces, since this is up here, will get a little bit wonky since you can skip over this if it's too technical. But what's happening here, and I'll draw it. Here's a blank piece of paper. So what you have here is you have every comment, and you have every comment along the top by every person. Okay, so you have all of these comments by all of these people, and there are something like 50 comments in the conversation, and there are something like, I don't know, 400 people in the conversation. So you have a matrix that goes 50 in this direction and 400 in this direction. And at any given slot, any participant may agree, disagree, or pass with any one of these statements. And so this is what we call a highly dimensional space. There's a huge number of combinations of how that matrix could be filled in. And that's generally the complexity of trying to go to the movies with friends. If you go, you and one other friend, you have 2 agreements. If you go with 3 people, right, you have this person, and this person. You have 3 agreements. If you have 4, you now have, it's geometrically more complex, right? You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then if you add it, you don't have 4 agreements. You actually have 6. And then if you go to, 5 people, you have a geometrically more complex set of agreements that have to happen. Does this make sense? Yeah. That as you increase the complexity of the matrix, of that matrix that I just showed you, of what all the possible comments are. Think of it like movies. Every possible movie, we're going to ask 3,000 people what movie they want to go see. It's all the movies on Netflix, by every single person, and we're going to try to agree on a movie, right? And so this is a very, very complicated task for humans. And so you've got all these statements and you've got all these people, and what we're doing is the computers are good at looking at matrices and producing meaning, and that's the math. That's what I'll limit the explanation to that, but like what we work on is what Pol.is does is to produce that matrix in real time, to analyze that matrix in real time, and to produce groups from that matrix in real time of people that tend to vote similarly. And so what you're seeing in the groups, and now I'll show you what that means. And so if you've voted now a few times, you'll maybe have popped into a group. And I'll.
Do you want to screen share? Do you want to screen share yours, Colin?
Yeah, I'm gonna do that. Yeah. Here we go. So I'll reduce this so that it's okay. So show this group in the upper right. Sorry, no, lower left. Lower right. Lower right is good. This is a good place to start. So this group says, in the years ahead, football is going to have a recruiting problem. They overwhelmingly agreed with that statement. 85% of this thinks that football is going to have a recruiting problem. The other groups you can see, about half disagreed, about 75% disagreed. If you click on the next statement, overwhelmingly this group says, I'm not going to let my kids play. This group in the upper right disagrees. Seems like they are going to let their kids play. We look at another statement. I feel troubled by poorer folks willing to take risks for our own enjoyment. They feel trouble about this morally. The group in the upper right disagrees for some reason, but they're not, they don't really think that that's true. And it's interesting because that kind of correlates with allowing their kids to play. Like, the idea is the group in the lower right has this thesis you kind of see emerging that I'm not going to let my kids play, so therefore, and I'm maybe middle upper class, so then therefore maybe other parents won't. I've seen stats on Pop Warner enrollment declining. Maybe there's going to be a socioeconomic component to willingness to play football, and I'm kind of uncomfortable with that. And then this group, unsurprisingly maybe, overwhelmingly disagreed with the statement, I played football in high school. And you can see in the upper left that this group generally agreed they played football in high school. The group in the upper right did disagree with that as well. And so let's take a look at the group on the left. We can kind of guess where they are. The group on the left, it seems likely that they are the football players. Okay, yeah, football's too big to fail, right? They're overwhelmingly likely to agree with that. The NFL has shown it's taking the issue seriously. That was not agreed on the other groups, right? The football players are like, football's too big to fail. The NFL's taking it seriously. Let's move on and let them take care of it, right? I'm still going to watch football, overwhelmingly agreed. I grew up watching football. I played football in high school. So the group on the left is like, there's nothing to see here, move on, right? This is the kind of minimize and discount group. I played it was good. Good things aren't bad, and I'm, we can move on. Now in the upper right, they are going to let their kids play. They don't think the danger is like smoking. They disagree that football is going to have a recruiting problem. So this is like the disagree group. Those are the statements that differentiated them. We can see, they are going to let their kids. They didn't play when they were a kid, but they are going to let their kids play, and that's kind of this unique cluster in the upper right. And so, but given all of that, given that there is real difference, if you click majority opinion, you can see we should still be able to engage in things with downsides if we understand what the downsides are. 75% of the entire conversation agreed with that statement, which is, I think that's kind of like, that's a pretty, I think it's pretty human. It's like, well, okay, is the person going in as a conscious participant? That we should have the information out there, but if they still make the choice, they make the choice. Also, pretty overwhelmingly, generally agree that 70% that safety equipment isn't going to fix this. That it's going to be harmful to people. It's going to be injury prone. And we're not necessarily going to get over this. That the monetary incentives are going to continue to attract people. That was generally agreed on. That a third of NFL players developing cognitive problems resulting from brain damage is a big deal. That was generally agreed on, despite everything else. Hopefully the NFL will work to prevent injuries. So you can see there are statements that do cross-cut all of these groups, even though there are distinct groups with really interesting opinions. They are out in consultation saying, like, okay, it seems like in terms of personal responsibility, there is a strong personal responsibility axis that runs through all of these groups, and can thread through all that safety equipment isn't going to fix this. We need to account for the fact that this is going to continue to be injury prone, that some people are going to choose to continue to play, and that they should be allowed to continue to play. And that we really need to try to make it safer while allowing people to make personal choices. Seems to be kind of this theme. What I'll emphasize is that all of the statements that are in here either were comments that I found online. I found maybe like 10, 15 comments at the beginning, and put into the conversation anonymously by using seed comment. That's something really important that you should do if you're starting a conversation. You should seed comments, because when someone shows up, it'll just be an empty box. And as we know, most people don't. Most people want to vote. They don't want to comment. And so, if there's 10, 15 things for them to agree on, the first people hitting the conversation will be able to produce data for you, and that's good. So go find some comments on the internet or statements exist, or identity statements like, I'm male, I'm female, I work downtown, I work, in the suburbs, whatever is appropriate to the theme of the discussion, and then some opinions like, I'm generally in favor of this proposal. Put some stuff in there people will say, and then at least some people will hold those opinions. They won't have to restate them, and you'll kind of get that. You'll get some stuff in there. But the statements then, the rest of the statements, were created by people putting in their statements. And so this is kind of another way to think of this. One way to think of this is a survey that is created by the people taking it. And that's I think that's a really interesting way to think of it, because if we think of how we survey populations, we generally don't. These are some very interesting statements. We might have asked, we might have thought to ask people, did you play football in high school? I don't know. I mean, maybe that's a really interesting thing that came out, that someone submitted, I played football in high school. Someone put it in. They thought it would be interesting. And I think it's interesting that they thought it was interesting and relevant. And they kind of, maybe like they wanted to know where everyone stood on that. And so to surface that information in the population, just so they could become more conscious, someone dumped that in. And then as everyone agreed on it, it revealed that in the population. And it's kind of neat to kind of see that demographic data as people are willing to share it. They can pass, of course. But if they are willing to share it, then whatever the population itself is interested in and whatever they think is relevant is part of what emerges. And that might be very surprising. What emerges may be very surprising to the powers that be. And the agenda setting power being in the population then is quite powerful, because they decide what the axes of consideration are. And the other thing I'll emphasize, besides the fact that all the dimensions were created by people, is that you can do this without the visualization. You can do this where all of the where people don't see this. All that's necessary to using Pol.is is having statements here. They don't even have to come from people. They could just be a bunch of statements that are put in. Could be like a bunch of statements from people in government that you want to see what their reaction is. All you really need is this little box right here that does the agree, disagree, pass. That's it. And then the other, but as part of that, this happens because of people agreeing and disagreeing and passing. The visualization, the insights, like all of this stuff isn't something you have to do to get anything from it. It kind of happens magically as the conversation unfolds, and it happens in real time, so everyone can watch the conversation kind of move and take shape, and like the bubbles will pop around and and change and kind of come together and then move apart. And in the future, we will be doing more with this. We just need to get people. We're really focusing on distribution now rather than adding features, because it's kind of to a point where like it's a next step, but there are a lot of next steps to this. And so I also thought maybe it would be interesting, since this is being recorded, to talk a little bit about where we think this is going. Is that okay? Would that be?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I haven't really talked about this much in public yet, but it's exciting to talk about. One thing. Oh, hold on. It just said I'm going to restart the screen share. It just said Patrick ended my presentation. So fine, Patrick. Okay. So one thing that we're going to do is allow people to drill down into these groups. So when you click on a group, it's like, okay, fine, you identified two groups, you identified liberals and conservatives, right? Here's another conversation. Here's a conversation that happened in Taiwan. It was 3,000 people. It's on the death penalty in Taiwan. And okay, fine, you identified pro and against. And maybe that's not, maybe that's like overall not that interesting, right? Because we kind of knew there was pro and against. And so if this is the pro group and this is the against group, then maybe what we really want next is to be able to click into this and then drill down and see like what are the subgroups that exist within pro and what are the subgroups that exist within anti. So that is one place that we think it would be interesting to take this interface to allow people to kind of dig down. And I would say that the original motivation for this is to allow people to become more conscious of the group, because in consultation, that's really why you show up in person, right? Like you want the people to modify their own opinions and kind of see like, oh, shoot, like, okay, that's not controversial. I thought that would be controversial, and it's not. And I thought everybody disagreed with me, they don't. Or I thought everybody agreed with me, but they don't. Or, oh, wow, I kind of learned something about that group that I didn't know much about before. And those are insights that we'd like people to have. We think they're peaceful, peacemaking insights, and that's why we visualized it. We wanted people to be able to kind of see where each other were, that in longer timeline. Are you familiar with liquid democracy or the concepts of liquid at all? Okay, so So what we're really what we're about to try, probably possibly over this winter, maybe as late as next spring, is for since this is going advancing in Taiwan and it's going to move across the government more widely. You know, we have it's been kind of it's been on our minds to have a profile page. So for every person that votes in a conversation, it's like, here are the conversations I voted in. Here's how I voted. Here are people that voted like this person across multiple conversations. And then if I have a profile page, who voted like I did across many conversations? Who am I ideologically like on agricultural policy? Who am I ideologically like on foreign policy? And like to kind of take these things, and then because it's a recommender engine, right, it clusters you with people that are like you ideologically on a lot of dimensions with enough data to be able to say, would you like this? Would you like to defer your vote to this person when you're not voting? And then that is a very like baby step into saying we're going to gather this in a hierarchy. We have a hierarchy in place eventually where we can say, okay, I'm going to defer my vote in agricultural policy to someone that I know that follows that really closely, and he can have my agricultural token, whatever it is. However you kind of divvy up those topics or those dimensions, there is a logical step from what we're doing here to deferring your voting power or your agreement and disagreement power, because at least what you're saying, kind of in a stochastically at least, like at least statistically, what you're saying is I agree with this statement, and there are like maybe 200 people who have given me their voting power. They are pretty likely to agree with this also. And so then if you can do that, and as that scales up, then you can kind of have these very well-informed people carry a little bit more weight in consultation. And so that is one. So first is allowing to kind of see subgroups. The second is allowing to see like people who vote like you, so that you can give them your voting power on issues that you feel less qualified to talk about. And then the third is that we're planning on doing crowd moderation, so to take the burden off of the moderators. So if you disagree with a statement, or if you pass unsure will become something like other, like flag for abuse or spam, or just say unsure. And then if you disagree, it'll say something like, it'll give you 3 other options related to that. It'll be like not factual, or etc., or like emotional or whatever, or irrational. If you agree, it'll be like important or like mundane, something like these are not the actual words, but something to the effect of that will help surface important comments, take away spam, and try to get some of the burden of curation onto the people in the groups. And really, where we think that can go is to have groups moderate themselves, in the same way that it's rather inappropriate for a white moderator on the CNN website to be moderating a conversation among Black Lives Matter activists. It's really not appropriate for them to make the assessment like this doesn't belong, this statement doesn't belong, and this statement does. To try to bring the curation power out of the hands of the government into the hands of the population as well, because that's one of the sticking points right now. Is like the government has the power to moderate comment in and out, and so that is an overview of what it is and what we think it can become if people pick it up and it continues to get used. We're excited to build that stuff if it does get used, if it does continue to get used, and we're really excited about some of those ideas, and so I'm glad to have an opportunity to share. And so let me unshare for just a second, and I'm going to go into the admin dash for this conversation and screen share that. Okay, so you'll see topic and description. You'll see an opportunity to add seed comments. You can turn the visualization on and off. You can turn the comment. You can allow them to comment or not. You have to allow them to vote. There's no conversation without that. You can turn the social sharing buttons on and off. You can turn the prompts to log in off if you want to make it anonymous and enforce that. You can make the background, the button color pink if you want. This is the important one though. Strict moderation is the thing that if you're going to run a conversation, you really have to know about. If you click this on, that means that no comments will be shown unless you manually approve them. And that's good if you have a contested thing and there's angry people and you don't want hateful speech to get in at all. If you turn it off, then you can moderate things out still, but they'll be shown to people while they are in the queue. It'll go right from that person's keyboard to everyone. And so if that's scary, then turn that on and and then be on top of it. So you can see comments here. Let's go to accepted here. You can see here are the comments. You can click reject on any of them. You can see when it was created, how many times it's been voted on. And then if you go to seed, this is where you can add comments for participants to vote on anonymously. And you can do that in configure as well. You can do that right here. It's the same thing. It's just important, so we did it twice. We're about to rebuild the. At some point in the next few months, we will make the configure screen probably turn into a wizard. We just haven't gotten to it yet. There's a lot going on right now. But seed comment is where you can put a bunch of statements in that other people will see, and you can also seed a tweet. If you want to, you can paste in a tweet URL. It'll pull it into the conversation and pull in that user's avatar. So you can pull in like Barack Obama's tweet. It'll put him in the visualization, and then he'll move around into the group that agreed with that statement. And so he'll move around the visualization as if he was in it. And so you can put like politician statements or their tweets in. You could put like 30 politicians' tweets in, and then like let people vote on what they said, and then kind of see how it comes out. That's also a very alternative way to use it. We're trying to make this really flexible, but it's a lot of this stuff is going to be power user because starting it, you kind of have to invest, in what we're doing right now to like feel really confident in starting these. And we're trying to like make it really powerful to do and curate and start and get information from, and really, really easy to use. And so, thanks for taking the time to invest, in kind of getting your head around it. Data export, you can dump all the data that we have, all of the data we collect. You can dump to CSV, host it on an open data thing so that people can see the comments, the votes, all of it. We also produce a text summary, and this is exactly what you just saw, the general consensus, the different groups. Here's group one, right? It's too big to fail. I grew up playing football. Same thing, but in text form. The idea with this eventually is that we can email, for instance, the text summary to politicians who it can just show up in their inbox. A conversation happens automatically. Maybe you make a rule 6 months later, 12 months later, 24 months later, a Pol.is conversation happens automatically, scripted on Facebook ads, goes out, collects a whole bunch of opinions, is crowd moderated, and then the output of it shows up in the politician's inbox without anybody having done anything. That's part of the vision here is like automated feedback. And we haven't really had an opportunity to deploy automated feedback yet, but I wrote a piece which I will show. I'm going to share it. Hold on. Just a second. Automating. Yeah. So here are my thoughts on that, and I'll paste that into chat, and you can add that below. But this is an idea that I think could be really powerful, but it's down the road. I mean, we're still just trying to get people to do it once and manually. But like, my idea really is that because we can produce a text summary, the data should come from the people who are relevant to the people who need to hear it. And we can query every forest ranger in the country. We can query 3,000 teachers every month based on how some rule is performing, and then just have that show up in the inboxes of the DOE without them having to like run an in-person town hall, kind of get involved, mucking about. I still think that, and so like what I hope it makes like for people, Bianca, like you, who are doing this, is to just give you these tools to say like, look, we're just gonna fire feedback at you. We're gonna fire a really high resolution feedback at you all the time. And it's going to be way less expensive and way more frequent. But there will still be so many points of contact for setup, and like population identification is a huge one, and like kind of again where it slots into all these different processes. Like for instance, maybe a conversation happens automatically, and then we automatically message and identify 3 or 4 people who are going to, from each group, who are willing to show up over Google Hangouts with you, and like email them all a link, schedule a time automatically with everybody, and then like the first time a human touches it, where the first time is like Bianca, sets it up, does population identification and Facebook ads. The whole thing runs automatically 6 months later, and then it like schedules a date with all of them, and you puts it on all of your calendars and says like, and then you're all in there, and you've been, a day beforehand, you've been emailed this text summary of like kind of where everybody was, and then you can kind of like go through that, get a transcript of what the what the in-person drill down was over Google Hangouts, and then take that transcript and email that to them as well, and then you've got like. You've done that, and you've done it like maybe 40 times a year rather than 4, and so scaling this up and making it possible to do this with larger populations more frequently is a really big part of what we're hoping for maybe in over a couple 2-3 years from now. Hopefully we have a couple examples of that happening. You can moderate the visualization if you have a senator show up or a congressman or a mayor show up and you want to make sure that they're shown. You can feature them so that everyone will see that they are in a group and that they're participating. You can also hide them if like we voted, I voted in the conversation, right? So I want to hide like a brand, hide a person. Someone shows up with a bunch of Twitter followers, you want to feature them. And then that is just about it. The last thing I'll show you is like starting it. You're going to land here when you start. Click New. It exists. So, I'll say like, hi there. Hi there, Toronto. I'll submit that as a comment. Go to Toronto, and then I'll go to share and embed. I'll click the link. It exists. I'll send that to you, and then that's it. But that's setting up a conversation. That's starting one and sending it out. And so I just sent you the link, and like so in terms of like sending it out and getting rapid feedback, if some thousands of people got that link, came in, voted on 10 comments that were already there, submitted a comment if they had an idea, great. If you want to have it embedded on your site, then you won't see this header. You won't see, it will just show up. Just this part right here will show up on your site, and you can embed it just like you would Discuss or another commenting platform on your site. That's what I got.
That's pretty incredible. Do you want to? What are your thoughts, Bianca? Go to you.
Yeah. One thing that comes to mind, which is cool because it would be supported by this as it is now, is making sure that you have a round where people can vote more on solutions to problems. Mm-hmm. Because I felt like when I was clicking all those statements, that's sort of to give a real life parallel. If you're at a public meeting and you're around small tables,
yeah,
those are those discussions you're having, which is great, right? So you're learning about people, you're learning about their positions and what might inform them and whatnot. Yeah. But then in terms of getting to a solution, one of those really simple questions we ask about things is, what do you like? What don't you like? What would you do about it?
Yeah.
And it's this constant, and that's a facilitator's thing, right? Is that you never let people get away with I agree, I disagree. It's like, okay, well, what's the thing? If you don't like that, what should that thing be? And it's not. All this is just building a bit more of a flow of types of conversations, like where you have one where you all kind of get to know each other, and then you have one where the only kinds of comments are suggested approaches to a solution.
Well, if you did layer that into another conversation, then you would see how solutions are generally favored by the different populations. You could do one where you just did that, but if you did it in the context of a conversation that did have all those other statements as well, then it's just more layers and dimensions on top of the other stuff.
Totally. Yeah, and I think it's those kinds of things that I'd be so intrigued to know, based on how you've been thinking about all of this, sort of how some of these things that you really try to get going in a room would translate or could translate, or how you make sure those benefits are there. And I also think that the sort of sequential opportunities with this is really cool, because you can have a day where you're collecting ideas, and a day where you're sort of opining on the ideas, and a day where you're deciding what you're going to do about them. And I think that's back to that flow chart. So it's not really it's process related. It's not the technology piece. But I think like I'm very keen to just sleep on this and think about this a bit, because I think some of these things, if when you look at those processes, it'll trigger you to think, like, how would you just suggest people apply this in bursts, in timing, in time between, in how you frame the comments, and like, it wouldn't require any changes to what I just saw. It's just more how would you organize some of the discussions. It's extremely interesting. It's like my mind's spinning.
Yeah, you are correct that the technology as it is, what you do as a facilitator can have a lot of power in what you get as the output. It's a substrate or a medium, but the kind of character of what people are dumping into there, like we did a conversation in Taiwan, which was just like things I like to cook with, and everybody dumped in things they like to cook with, and I'll paste in the conversation. It's saying, because it is a prompt, it's an explicit prompt, and the prompt can be, in this case, really specific, right? Let's see, I found it. Okay, here it is. And so we actually, what's interesting about this conversation is that I hypothesized, I don't think it's a hard hypothesis, like it's not a difficult one to form, right? That you're going to find vegetarians. Majority opinion was potato, rice, egg, and then you see, like, if you click on the top, beef is agreed on in the top, and everybody in the lower group disagrees with beef because they're all vegetarian. And so, like, like the clusters identify vegetarians, and it's kind of a proof of concept that it works. That you can here, I'll share my screen real quick just so that that's on the the record there. There you go. Like on the bottom, cooking with coffee. That's interesting. Like, beef is people on the top cook with beef. People on the bottom don't cook with beef. Why? As a vegetarian, both of them cook with potato. There you go. It's like that was an explicit prompt. It was like, put in foods. Like the nature of statement that I would like you to submit are foods. That's what a statement is. And just very much to your point there, the character or nature of statement is it really, you can shape that, you should shape that. I think that's where I actually think that the amount of power that you have in shaping that and framing that and where you put that is actually where many people have bounced with in conversations with me about Pol.is, because here's this powerful you have the power to kind of like frame a discussion with thousands of people, but I think you're confident in doing that, and you kind of see how that fits into process. I think there is some art there. I think there is some experience there, and Audrey has that experience from doing years of in-person facilitation in government, of thinking how you might frame this discussion, and you have that, and your reaction to that is that you're thinking deeply about that specific problem. And I think I think for a lot of people approaching this, that piece is going to be overwhelming. So if you have any interest after you try this, and after you try it with the population in Toronto, if you have any interest in writing about that idea, we'd love to publish it on the Pol.is blog, so that other people can find it. Just your thoughts about like how to frame a discussion, because it's a different kind of bias. I mean, did I bias people when I said submit statements? I mean, it's like I didn't just bias them. I sent them on a path. I framed the discussion, and I would moderate it. If someone put I don't know, if someone like I went to a baseball game last month. If someone put that in, I would just reject it because it isn't on the train tracks. And so kind of what you get out of it, it does have a lot to do with how you frame it. Anyway.
Yeah. And there's a lot of power in setting people up that they can frame it too. Like that's the idea, is that if you're saying here's completed solutions, as long as you put it in this format, you're putting forward your solution, and then you can get buy-in from others, right? So it's sharing that power.
Right.
Which is really cool.
And also the power to say and potentially have the entire conversation agree with, really, we're talking about the wrong thing here. We should be talking about X. And that is what I think is so powerful about allowing anyone to put a statement in front of everyone. Maybe they say, hey, like this direction that we're going isn't, sure, we're arguing about this, but like really we should if we go step back a few paces and look at the big picture here, we're not taking into consideration, I don't know, wheelchair accessibility, and it's really going to break all this. But they can add a minute detail, which is an edge case which breaks the fundamental idea, or they can say that the fundamental idea is kind of like the wrong direction as such because we're solving the wrong problem. So I mean, like both of those things, more detailed and more abstract, are people can go to those places in a way that kind of goes against the countervailing, or is countervailing to the intention that you put forward.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. That is power sharing. And with surveys, there's no power sharing in surveys.
Right.
There's surveys are about putting forward the statements. I played football in high school. Agree, disagree. Or yes, no, and you get back you put in. And so we have to think about bias in a different way, and that's really unexplored territory with regard to like how does bias change when we're doing power sharing in this way. And how do we think about bias when we are allowing people to say anything, but we also have the power to send them in a direction and prompt them? And how do you set up a good prompt? And how do you frame the discussion, and what statements do you give them with regards to education prior to, and how might that influence their statements? So we're thinking about bias in survey tech as such, also unexplored, and we really need a few academics to like kind of get in there on that. Again, kind of not something we can see from our perspective. We know it's there. We know it's different, but we can't really, write about that as well as someone like you work for.
It's so interesting. I mean, like we're talking about everyone has the ability to bias all others in the consultation process, with maybe slightly more advantage to those who start it. But what is that? I mean, it's a little less scary. But I noticed that you had the ability to allow any citizen to export the data on the fly as it's going, which is like super intriguing for long form sorts of conversations like that go for 4 weeks, because I can imagine a whole ecosystem of people can build things around like, if everyone can export the tools, you can essentially understand.
That's actually in. Did you see that in the admin dash?
I did, yeah. And I guess that's a very technical, specific person concern and thought to have, but it's the idea that the ability to work up and analyze the data, even above and beyond what everyone gets from your visualization, is like anyone through the process can work up and understand, and in a way that the people who hosted the polls only had that before and only after the fact. So it's just, it can really like you can maybe see where your weaknesses are as an independent group, and strategize around that.
Right now, we only allow, this is inside of the moderation queue, which only the person who starts it sees.
Are you screen sharing right now?
No, but I am pointing at my monitor.
Maybe it's just me that doesn't see it.
No, that was a joke. I'm sorry.
Oh.
No, I'm pointing at my monitor without screen sharing, as if you can see it. I'm sorry. So this is inside of this is behind the scenes, and this is the part that only you can see. This is like comment moderation and participant moderation, and this is where you can export. However, I do think that having a download button right here to download all the raw data by anybody would be an option. Like anybody can download raw data is just a checkbox, and maybe that actually is there already.
Yeah, I think you did have it.
Open data. Yep, there it is.
Yeah.
So let's click open data, and then maybe that goes back here. If you go to, hold on. Open data. Anybody can download it. You know what I think that was? Open data, that I believe means that anybody can go to this URL. Or actually, I think it means that from an API level, anybody can request the data. I think that's what that means. So right now we don't. It's not like it's in the UI and people can download it because they're not going to get anything useful. But it's so that it can be done procedurally.
Okay. No, still though, that's incredible.
Yeah. So anybody can build any third-party thing on top of this as it's going. Yes.
I did. Was there? I think I had. Bianca, if you want to, if there's any thoughts that you have right now, feel free.
I think it's a bit connected to the idea of getting people to have solutions, rather than just weighing in. And I think that from a forcing people to be constructive, finding these ways that these points, basically these discussions they're difficult. The situation governments have been in to date are difficult. And that idea that consensus, it's not really always about consensus. It's like, how do you live with the thing? You're not getting everybody's going to run out of the room and say, oh, perfect, that's what I wanted. You basically get everybody running out of the room saying, it's fine. But that's
success.
That's success, yes. Right? Is that you get to the middle and you say, okay, under what conditions can you live with this thing? So I also think there's something about maybe going from 20 things to getting down. I just think there might be something interesting in adjusting the options. There's one where you're kind of figuring out where it hits on stuff. Maybe you get down to a couple, and then you really have more of a forceful, under what condition. I'm just thinking about the ways that you can get people to have a consistent response to something. And I think it might just be a matter of, okay, so this many comments are in. Okay, good. We've dealt with that round. Now on the next discussion, we're going to have these 3 things, and you have to respond in X way. Basically, all I'm thinking about is the ways that you can do these in-room conversations. How do you? It's a bit of framing, but it's also it's sort of modifying what's there and really making people focus on something. You can't get out of this. Sorry, you're going to have to answer this because somebody's going to have to. And if you don't, that person's going to decide for you.
Right.
And it's interesting to try to think about these tools that you have to use in a room. Yeah. How do you do that in a way online where you sort of people realize that they have to participate in solving the problem? Yes. I think that's because that's the step forward, is because we keep making it seem like the government is just doing the wrong thing, or they're picking this way or the wrong way. It's hey, these are the factors they have to consider, so you got to come up with it. So I think that's just a really running theme for me, is how to replicate that constructive dialogue too. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna just keep thinking about that. So I'm kind of it's related to what I was talking about before, but I think it's
I think where you're going with that, with running a conversation that is intentioned to each one of these, how do you I'm actually not even going to. I'm just interested in your thoughts. I understand what you're saying with regards to, and your immediate reaction was collecting ideas and then opining, and then what do we do? Maybe breaking it up into phases, having multiple conversations, or after sleeping on it, or thinking about it, or hopefully running it a few times in Toronto and seeing how it comes out. Definitely interested to follow up with you on that and get your thoughts.
Yeah, for sure. It's really, I just think it's so nice to see something where I can just already think of ways to apply it. Awesome. So I have to say, before you joined, what I was saying to Pat was that there's so many times that governments want to do an online thing as part of their process.
Yeah.
And they're limited in their capacity to get people having this understanding of each other. That's where they always fall apart. So it's so nice to see that both things could be done with what you have, and as it is.
If you could just tweet,
just for you to hear that, that's
if you could tweet exactly what you just said, I'll put it up on the Gov page.
Yeah, this is really, really exciting. And I'll take you up on the writing a bit about framing, because I think that's a thing that you can be helpful to governments you're talking to, to help them to think about, those conversations in that process.
It is a huge blocker for us right now that we're on the tech side, and we have no experience doing what you do. And I mean, well, okay, that's not completely true now that we've done it in Taiwan. We've been observing it for 2 years, and I built that process diagram out of what I observed them doing. Right? But and they've been doing it for years, but I did not. Have you heard of Regulation Room from Cornell?
No.
Just a sec. I'll paste that in for anybody who's. So vTaiwan is Regulation Room plus Pol.is.
Okay.
So I'll paste that in and.
Okay, cool. Okay. Yeah, and I'm sure I'll think of more stuff. Like it's so encouraging for me to know that the community of the people who have the experience doing the thing that you don't have been looking for your thing.
Yeah.
Right? So that's really, really nice to see happening. Like, so you should know you're very well situated to help a lot of people that have been asked to include online consultation and know that it's just going to be some nonsensing up and down voting, right? And it stops there. So,
there is, and it's actually particularly sophisticated point in here about that, because when you have 50 people upvote and 100 people downvote, you have -50. And that is not what happened. What you have is exactly what happened. You have 100 people against and you have 50 people for. And that is a ratio of 2 to 1. And that is not reflected in those interfaces. And it absolutely infuriates me to the point where I've built something else, right? Or endeavored to do so, right? Like the efforts there, that we've undertaken. Our team is really really passionate about preserving minority opinions in the stakeholder process, and having the online consultation be a better reflection. And AI is magic. AI allows us to do some really magic things. And in trying to explain this to people, we do end up saying from the tech side, like, well, the car's going to drive itself. And it's like, well, we are going to have self-driving cars, and that is magic. And it's like, this is one of, it does kind of get into this magic realm where it's like, well, we're going to analyze all of the potential agreements and find them, and that will just happen. This really hard thing for humans will just happen. And I hope that I think we're just at. I don't think we were when we started, but I think smartphone penetration and web is to the point now where people are ready for this, and there have been enough generations of bad tech that that a certain cutting edge, like at the bleeding edge, there people are ready for this idea, and even though it is a little bit magic, they can see, okay, it's open data, so we can, even though this is an algorithm under the hood, the software is open source, and the data can be made open data, and we can kind of trust this. We can trust this process. It's not just simple upvoting and downvoting, but it can be kind of trusted, and that's something that something I'm hoping it can be understood and trusted as conceptually, and that which cannot be understood can at least be verified by some part of the open source community, because it's open source. That was a big thing for us to have done it at that time. And the last question for you is, we have some ideas about government, but where do you think, if right now we're just trying to make this happen in government, right? We're doing a lot of outreach but if we do find, for instance, in Toronto, if we do find the Toronto government willing to pay for it, and not yet, let's say that what we have now is a free and free forever service. On the government side, what do you think we'll find them likely to pay for or pay for more of? Is it us expanding to what you do? Or is it, or there are so many of you around, like I'm talking to people like you in different countries, and but we're also wondering on the gov side, if we're going to go in that direction, should we be hiring facilitators, or I think likely not, actually, because I think there are people that are already doing that, have been doing that in government all over the world, or is it and something that I'll leave open. Something that we would add, in some of these future iterations of the software. Where do you see it? What would be valuable? What would be advanced? What would be, do they want it? Do they want it branded? Do they want it? It seems less important if they can just embed it on their page to have that. You know, but are there advanced, you know, is there some advanced functionality, or is there some accessibility, or is there some, you know, is there some special thing that they're going to need that we don't have? You know, that is something that's going to be, you know, manual and expensive for us to do, that we will end up having to charge for it to really make an impact. We didn't hit that in Taiwan. The basic web version was enough for them to get really far with. And if that's good, then great. Then here it is. It's free, and you know we will we will. This is our mission to make this happen, and so we'll just work to make it happen. And we will make it. You know, we'll try to. I'll send this to Pol.is bot. This is our first paid offering, Pol.is bot. You know, but the Slack version for enterprise will be a self-serve bot to do exactly all this stuff with Slack teams, so that you just say, you know, what does channel think about question, and then the AI will facilitate a discussion, and then send a text summary back to the person who asked. And you know, we're hoping that with large teams and enterprise, that's interesting. You know, and we're hoping that with this, there's enough dissemination. But I am curious if there is anything, because there really wasn't in the Taiwanese situation. I'm curious.
I can tell you a couple of things, and this is another one I'm sure I can think more on, but a few things. Firstly, because people, so I've finished working at that firm just in the last couple of months. I'm having a baby in about a month and a half. But the way that the consulting firms operate, like the firm I was working at, is always RFPs, right? So we don't carry overhead sort of license products because it doesn't make sense. So for us, we would partner, and this would be like if we were bidding on a project and we wanted to have an advantage, we would love to say that we're exclusive with you on a bid to do a consultation. That's just one thing to keep in mind is do you plug into the people who are bidding on the work? One model. The second model is that the city, and if they do this, a city can license your product, and then the city says to anybody who works with them, you are going to build a piece of Pol.is into your consultation because we have a license. Sometimes we're going to run those consultations as the city. Sometimes we're going to run them with the vendor. And then I think in that model, there's a real benefit to you being available to tweak, support, work with, customize, blah, blah, blah. And whether that's something you do for the city or for the vendor that's bidding, those could both make sense.
And right now for us, because we are still only 3 people, the first is vastly more attractive.
Right. That makes sense.
Because our ability to work as a vendor with cities is extremely limited. In fact, we actually have in Australia worked like this previously, where someone doing the consultation was approaching the government and effectively sold, like as a part of the package of what they were selling to the government, sold a portion of us, and we did a revenue share. We've actually done that already. And so
that makes sense.
That completely validates, you know, what you're saying, and is great. I mean, so in that case, if you would like to work like that, and if you do think that you can sell what we are building to them, you know, we can either use this free to pilot or say that it's free to pilot, and then, you know, charge them and for it. But then we will, and that means that we are there for support and there for things like that. But I think it's a very good model. Because it rewards and enhances the value proposition of the consultant, and that's excellent.
Particularly in times where they're always asking, how are you online? Online. How do you reach the unusual suspects? How do you, like youth are unengaged? How do you engage youth? Like there's cities and regions are building particular outreach for youth.
Yes.
For example, you've got a big opportunity there.
Yeah.
Particularly with the social media integrations that you have. And I think that in this time, given that the roster of the tools that are out there are what they are, bidding with someone exclusively in different places, this is the kind of thing where you go city to city and suss out who the top 2-3 firms are.
Right.
And then exclusively would probably be a request. But that makes a lot of sense, and I'll think a bit more about that too. I'm sure there's other things, but that makes sense to me from what I've seen here. And one other thing is that the bane of a lot of people's existence with this stuff is reporting. Mm-hmm. And I think the fact that you can provide both the transparency piece but also an analysis level that comes from AI is very different. You know, like that's a different world too, because that's often a consultant's work, is to summarize, synthesize. Like when people hand in 200 worksheets, I read them all, which I do because when I stand in front of them, I can say, "Hey, John, I know your thing. I read it." Right. So because I've never seen anything that would ever make me think I wouldn't have to do that.
Yes.
But that's an interesting piece to keep in mind as well, is that influx, when you open the floodgates to public consultation and suddenly there's thousands of people responding, you got a lot more stuff to deal with.
Yes.
And you generally don't price according to the number of people that show up. So there's something in there that feels like you've got benefits for, but I'm not sure exactly what. But
that is a phenomenal point, and actually goes back to some of the conversations I hadn't been thinking about. Some of the other conversations I've had with the U.S. federal, the U.S. regulators are in some cases legally obligated to respond to every comment and have a massive disincentive to increase participation. Someone somewhere passed a law that was like, the regulators are going to respond to the people. And what they did, by passing that law was to massively disincentivize them from getting out there.
Yep, there's similar legislation provincially here for environmental assessments. You have to show what the response was to things.
So that makes a lot of sense from a software as a service platform. It's actually a very common pattern to get data in is free, and then the reporting data out is not. And so that having an exclusive relationship as the channel to sell and the reporting on the way out as the kind of efficiency piece is I think that's strong. I think that is like last mile kind of stuff that saves people the actual time. It is solving the problem more effectively. Yada yada yada. That's the tech. That's why it gets used. But it's not the business. The business is the efficiency piece and the competitive piece. So let's please talk more if that is interesting to you.
Yeah, totally. That's a private. I could just say a big difference between the private sector and the public sector. When I worked in the private sector, you'd build custom reports for clients that no one would read ever. Whereas in the public sector, if people are able to prove that when people participate, things come of it and it's analyzed and it's applied, totally different value. So that's a big pitch to make so people can see.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. Let's follow up with that. Let's follow up with that. After you've played around with it, so that you're sure. And here I just wanted to say here's a link. Not necessarily no need to put this in the link at the bottom, but if you scroll down, I'm going to be talking about all of this stuff at a conference in SF coming up in October. And if Toronto Civic Tech if you're able to get anything, if you're able to put this out in any way for anything before that, then I can have a second data point after Taiwan. If you could do something before October 10th, then and even if it's a small getting some sentiment on something, there's good opportunity for me there to kind of highlight and this is being picked up in Toronto and it has been used already in Toronto as an X, Y, Z, and then put some focus back there. I don't know if they like that or not. if attention is good, sometimes in government attention is bad. But
I'm sure we can think of a few different ways to do something, whether it's attached to a formal consultation or not.
Right.
I know we can figure something out. Hey, Pat.
Yeah, I gotta say, this is the best 2 hours I spent at 2 a.m. in the morning on a video conference that I have ever had. I'm definitely excited with this.
Thanks so much.
I don't want to rush it, but I know it is late, and I don't want to take Bianca. She was about to go to bed, so I don't want to hold you up too late. Maybe just real quick final thing. It sounded like I was going to end. But super quick, for real. It was hard to contain my excitement when you started talking about liquid democracy. That is a thing that I have a spiel that I often tell well out drinking that goes on for half an hour, and by the end,
you
people are converted.
You have blockchain in your profile. I know you're a liquid guy. I peg you from 2 miles away. It's like he's working in Civic Tech. He's working in Civic Tech, and he has blockchain in his Twitter profile.
I'm so cookie cutter. But I would love to riff on that some other time. Yeah, maybe not so late. But and the other final thought, I have less interesting things to say since I don't work in consultation. Everything you dropped at the end, Bianca, was amazing. But just the thought.
Absolutely.
I'm really intrigued by, there's so many, in the city, all the times when you see posters up about public consultations, and not that this in any way replaces the in-person, but even the idea of if there was like links to these things on each poster for development proposals that people could participate in as they walk by, and it would need, there's no facilitation there, which Bianca definitely impressed on me that's a super critical part, but yeah, it's
and as we talked about, like, even in vTaiwan, it framed it, right? This was something that happened for a month before the face-to-face, and framed it so that going into the face-to-face, people had a sense of where the crowd was, and then they weren't stepping off trying to. I mean, in a face-to-face, like, it's serial. Like, every person goes one at a time and speaks, and it's just painful not to have, like, so this is, massively parallelized beforehand, right? Everybody can talk at once. There's a whole synthesis and analysis, and then everyone has that in hand as they go, and they kind of know where they are, right? They know coming into the face-to-face whether they're in the majority or the minority. They know whether their point was controversial or not, and that's that hopefully what we saw in in Taiwan, that like that makes it more easable to come to a better outcome in the in the actual face-to-face. So you're not having to try to figure out what everybody thinks as well. But we can definitely talk about blockchain some other time. I mean, Liquid is a really crowded and noisy space, and I mean, I think blockchain. How blockchain affects democracy and blockchain voting is a really noisy space in civic tech. I've actually tried to avoid talking about blockchain and civic tech as it pertains to us now, purely because there are so many other people in that space. So we just want to pick a winner. Like the winner, I know that the winner will integrate with us, because that's if they're the winner, they would do something like that. If they're not the winner, they won't have that. And so I really feel like whoever is going to solve that part of the passage, that we're going to have, that these will be legitimate votes, that they'll be et cetera. That like every time you click agree that's that's going into that's a transaction. Certainly, all of those. Certainly, that's interesting. I think it's just maybe that's still 5 years ahead of time. In terms of getting up and running. I want to aim there, but I also want to see. I want a whole bunch of other people to die on that hill. I'm trying to die on a different hill at least.
I would love to bring up this topic further, but I think we should all go to bed. But I'm so.
I did not want to propose. This was like the time that I could do it tonight, and I was like, let's just do it tomorrow, because they're not going to want to do it at like 2 a.m. their time. But you did do it at 2 a.m. your time, which was very surprising.
We're hardcore. So just before, anyone have anything else to say before I stop the broadcast?
No.
Okay, so this would not have been the same without you, Bianca. I'm really glad that you stayed up.
Truly, thank you so much for being here and talking through this.
Colin, I'm so excited that you guys have done this, and that you've open sourced what you have. That just to be, I'm allowing myself to get excited about, someone working on this, what seems like a critical piece of governance infrastructure, because you guys have open sourced it. But I want you guys to make money. You need to make money, so
we got
navigate that as you need.
We got to sustain ourselves, and now it is about now. I mean, I am actually pretty singularly focused. I have after the Civicist article is actually where it turned for me. It was 4 years of effort to make that Civicist article happen, between building it and our team building it, conceiving it, building it, and then getting a pilot, and then getting that pilot noticed globally, and now. Now I am pretty singularly focused on monetization, because if it's not, then we can't spread this. We can't sustain ourselves and spread this if we don't. And so we open source so that the Civic Tech community would look at this and say like, okay, these guys are serious about and our team thought about this for months, and we all came together and said we have to do this if the energy that we're going to get, the organic energy that we're going to get to get other people on board with our mission of making this occur in the world is going to outweigh the potential competitive benefits or so there are pieces like, for instance, maybe the reporting piece won't be open source, right? The bot piece won't be open source. Maybe maybe some enterprise features or multi-moderation won't be, but the core technology isn't going to be bought or go anywhere. And someone can rebuild whatever they need to, if we mess up and sell to Microsoft, then we were. Am I on record saying that would be a mistake? I am. I'll go on record saying that would be a mistake. That if we do something like that, we wanted to demonstrate that people could build process on this, and they're not going to see one of those Medium posts that's like, we've learned so much. It's been a great 2 years, and now you're never seeing this again. And that just wouldn't be okay for this kind of a product. So.
Yeah, and just as a booster for you on that final point, this stuff is so hard. It's so process oriented. There's such a human component. So I think that thinking about how you work with the people who are doing that process part, there's so many opportunities to be helpful there. And it's that's the tech part is the tech part. There's a lot of hard stuff that's not. So how you work with people doing that, I think it's totally on the right track. So there's lots of opportunities that
That's wonderful. Thanks so much. It's wonderful to have that confirmation, and I really do think that this is the right abstraction, and I because this is where we've had success. We have not had success talking to government. They are terrified, and we are showing up at their door, and they're like, we actually had someone in government say. That he said, well, we've passed this around and passed this up the chain, and we think this would be a real nightmare for us.
Right. It's an interesting thing with the people who aren't government, and this is something we've talked a lot about that we've talked about for years, is why does a third party do this instead of government, right? And why are there people that have this good reputation in communities, and when you partner with those people, you're in, people will see that you're part of that kind of a process.
G0V had a good reputation with the community and did this and had the legitimacy to do this, and the legitimacy and goodwill with the community to get people to know that their voices are going to be heard is so much a part of that. And that is not how they feel about government, and that is not how government is really bad at population identification. There's no competency around that crap, which is stunning.
No, but it's also back to the city thing, is that Nicole, who has done this work for 15 years, that I feel somehow we're going to have to connect you guys, you can't escape the people you work with all the time, if you did a bad job, you can't go back to that neighborhood. So your face, that's it. It's your reputation. Yeah. So you easily find the people in the cities that are the people that have trust within communities, because they can show up again and again and again. Yeah. And people know that it's going to be a good process. So that'll help you figure out who you want to work with in cities. And that's, again, just back to your point about cities.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's a city. It's a very city, it's a geographic thing. So all those things are aligned with how you're working.
I would like to point out, in case there was any confusion, we're still broadcasting, still recording. That is, so
I knew. I see the live button. All of this it's fine. I mean, we open sourced our product.